One is not diabolically opposed to the other. For the eagle, soar is about flying, but for the eaglet, soar is about falling. If the eagle stirs her nest and the eaglets are pushed out of the comfort of their nest, is that not crushing? If their food supply is now cut off and they are pushed out by their own mother to fall off the side of a cliff, is that not crushing? Why would mama do that to me? Why would mama not feed me? And in the process of the eaglet falling, flapping its wings in hysteria, it is the thing that crushed the eaglet that causes it to soar.
Wow.
The whole value of crushing is to explain to people not to be confused when the crushing precedes a soaring. I was doing research for my book and I found out that the same part of the brain that processes physical pain processes emotional pain. So my brain doesn't know whether my heart is broken or whether you stabbed me in the leg. The same part of the cerebellum that sends the message that you're in pain is just as intense about a broken heart as it is about a stabbed leg. So all of a sudden I'm in trauma, but there's no paramedic because I'm not bleeding. I'm not being crushed on the outside where you could put a tourniquet on it and send me to the emergency room. I'm being crushed in my heart. There are all kinds of ways for you to be crushed in places that people don't see, and it affects you like you are being stabbed. This trauma of the soul cannot be treated in the hospital. This trauma of the soul, this secret crushing that God allows us to go through sometimes in our life are beyond explanation. But remember that crushing is not the end. You don't want anything before it's time. Nothing before it's time. There's a time and a season for every purpose under heaven.
After I began my physical recovery from Lyme disease and started to put some of those symptoms in the past, I realized that my psychological, my emotional, and my spiritual recovery was going to be just as important as my physical recovery. Lyme disease for me, and I look at other people's stories like Megan and other people that I've talked to, it can be a very spiritual journey, and it can introduce a level of trauma into our lives. And not just Lyme disease, but really anything that disturbs a couple fundamental boundaries in our lives, boundaries of how we view the world and how the world relates to us. One of these boundaries is the belief that the world is generally a safe place, and the second boundary is that we have a level of control over our lives. So when I walked through something where I went from being healthy and life was going my way, I was working, married with a kid, to 6 months later having over a dozen symptoms, felt like I was losing my mind, felt like I was dealing with some sort of crazy neurological disease, and eventually ending up in a psychiatric unit for 30 days, where 6 months prior I was healthy. I lost the belief that the world was a safe place and that I had a level of control over my life. When I began my physical recovery, I realized that emotionally and mentally and spiritually I was still very broken. I had lost my zeal for life. I had lost my desire to be a better person or to try. I felt like none of it mattered because I had been through an experience that had to a degree traumatized me, and I lost my belief that what I did mattered, that being a good person mattered, that being healthy mattered. I felt like anything could happen at any time because of what I had walked through. And thankfully, by God's grace, I've been on a path of recovery from that, where I've been able to acknowledge what I walked through, but not to identify with it, not to stay in a victim mentality, and not to identify with what happened to me. But I've really been able to take a step back and in some ways be grateful for it. The book of James talks about how we can consider it joy when we face various trials because it produces endurance and perseverance, and that when we let endurance run its course, we'll be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And I would never wish to go back and experience what I experienced again, because there were so many times where it was beyond what I felt like I could bear, where I felt like I was being torn apart into 1,000 different pieces. But I can honestly say that what has been produced in me, in regards to courage and empathy, compassion and knowledge and resilience, I wouldn't trade it for the world. You know, a lot of people with Lyme disease that I talk to, they deal with shame and they deal with fear. They deal with shame that they're a bad person, or what they're experiencing has to do with something that they did and now they deserve this, or just intense fear around everything, every new symptom, fear about trying new treatments, fear about getting better. And it really is a spiritual journey. You know, Lyme disease had invaded my dream life. I would have dreams, countless reoccurring dreams where I would be running through a maze, or I'd be going on a racetrack, and the whole night I'd be trying to find the end, trying to find a way out, trying to find a way to the finish line, and the dreams would always end with me being just back at the start. I could never find a way out. Or dreams where I was needing help, where I was needing to call somebody, and I would pick up my phone to dial 911 or dial a family member, and my fingers kept hitting the wrong buttons. For what felt like forever, I could just never get the help that I needed. So I had a level of these reoccurring dreams that were kind of tormenting, and it was kind of like my psyche or my subconscious trying to process what was happening to me. And I look at, even biologically with Lyme disease, Dr. Alan MacDonald, a world-leading pathologist who dedicated decades of his life to studying Lyme disease. His grandfather died of Alzheimer's, and he made it his life mission to study and search that, look into that. And the more he did, he found links between Alzheimer's and Lyme disease. And we know that patients with advanced Alzheimer's, they experience personality changes, maybe aggressive behavior, they lose their memory, they kind of lose their mind and can become like a different person. It's very scary. So at one point he accessed 10 brain samples from the Harvard Brain Bank, people that had died with late-stage Alzheimer's, and he found the Lyme spirochete bacteria in 7 out of 10 of those brain samples. And what he found completely floored him. He found that when he looked closer with molecular methods, that in those brains it was a part human DNA and it was a part Lyme spirochete DNA linked up into one molecule. So in those advanced late-stage chronic Lyme disease patients, the disease had become so a part of that person that it was almost inseparable. It was at a DNA level. And to me, that helps understand biologically how this bacteria can so affect a person beyond just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So my message today is not a message of fear. It's not a message of despair. It's not a message of identifying with what has happened to us or what is happening to us, but it's a message of hope. And to not brush under the rug the traumatic experiences that we have walked through, but to embrace them and learn from them, and to be kind to ourselves, and to allow God to work into these areas of our life, to the messy, ugly areas, to the deepest, darkest nights of our soul, to take us into a place of beauty and strength that we never thought was possible. And I'm a living testimony of that. I have vivid memories of what I was like at my worst, and I never want to go back there. It was just the depths of darkness in my soul, in my character, in my mind, and in my body. But what God has done through me in this spiritual journey is something I'm so thankful for, and that's why I'm passionate to pass it on.
Full of madness at first, but now gladness bursts out the seams of our beings, cause we overflow with the oil of joy, the ointments of the anointed, mending any torn soul, healing any broken bone. He is here. He was there. He is peace. He is faithful.
Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong.
Diet's good. Diet's good.
Keep singing.
Diet's good.
They are weak, but
3
he
is
is strong.
strong.
Yes, Jesus loves me.
Yes,
Jesus loves me.
Yes,
Jesus loves me. The
Yes,
Bible tells me.
I do.